Hey guys, it's Biddy. I'm gonna show you real quick on this video, I hope it comes out, how to use your India ink for this project that we're doing with the negative space. So basically you're going to be filling in some interesting part of your composition that is your negative space with black as a way to emphasize the negative space instead of the positive space. So let's pretend these two shapes that I've drawn here are my negative space drawings. For this larger, what I'm going to do is I have my clean brush, totally dry. It's a, let's see, number 4. That's my smaller brush. I've got a rag next to me so that I can wipe my brush dry or take the excess ink off, because what happens when you have too much ink on, such thin paper that we're going to be working on is it's going to get the paper too wet, and then the paper is going to start buckling and tearing, and you don't want that to happen. So what I'm going to do for this first application is just dip the very, very tip of my brush into the ink, and I'm going to kind of give it a quick tap in case there's any excess water on the rim of my Higgins ink container. And first, real lightly, I'm just going to go way inside the edge here. And then as the ink starts to spread, see how I'm not going all the way to the edges? Then I apply a little bit more pressure when there's less ink on the brush. It's going to be helpful for you guys to turn your paper or reposition yourself, but it's hard for me to do it right now because the cameras or the iPad's right in the way. Okay, so this is going to be a little bit tough, this edge, for me, this angle I'm at. And notice how I'm going in one continuous line. The reason why is if you do this sort of thing where you're dabbing, it's going to be really hard to get a perfectly straight edge. See how, well, maybe you can't see on the camera, but I'll exaggerate a little more. So if you do something like this, not only is it not going to give you a totally straight edge, your end result isn't going to be as smooth as you want it to be. So just take your time, keep your wrist still, move your arm instead. Okay. So here where I started, where I said I was just going to go on the inside of the edge because I was afraid that there'd be too much ink and it would bleed, I'm just going to real lightly do that. Okay? Over here as well. And since I'm such a perfectionist and I don't want this ruined, I'm going to wait for those edges to dry before I fill in the rest. Alright, now let's start on this circle. It's a little bit smaller shape. I'm using the same small brush, and I haven't even reapplied ink to it. I haven't dipped it again. I'm going to do the same thing just inside the edge, as continuous as I can. And if you were looking at my whole arm right now, I'm keeping my fingers and wrist pretty still, and I'm just moving my arm from my elbow down. Whoopsies. This is a really hard position for me to get into. Okay. So the camera's right where I want to put my arm right now. I'm just going to make do. Let's hope this turns out okay. And it didn't. Okay. But when there's no camera in your way or iPad in your way, you should be able to turn your page so that you're as comfortable as possible making that clean edge. Alright, so now that that's blocked in, I'm going to go grab my flat brush. This one I have here is a number 8. It's angled, yours might not be, but this is all I had, and it's actually pretty ideal for doing something like this. So again, just the very tip of my brush, dip it into the ink, tapping off the excess. I'm actually going to give this a real quick wipe on my towel, just on one side, because the last thing you want to do is have too much ink going on this thin paper. Okay, so I'm going to start off where I left off, not trying to overlap anything yet, just from edge to edge. Really thin coats so that the paper doesn't quickly get too wet and start looking screwy. Okay? See how it's really thin? I'm going to go over here, do the same thing. Whoops, now my brush is way too dry. Let's give it one more dip. Dip in the ink. Oh, I don't think I got any. Okay. And I'm kind of tapping my brush. You can't see it, but I'm tapping my brush on the rim of my ink container to sort of get a lot of that excess ink off. This is where I really want to turn the paper, but I can't. Alright, so just real roughly, that's what I'm doing. Just covering it with really light coverage. Alright, back to this shape. Now I haven't reapplied any ink to my brush. I'm going to go the opposite way that I did the first time. And this time, I'm going to try to go as close to the edge as possible. Need more ink. Alright, so let's wait for that to dry real quick.